Stop the tape. Dr. Phil raised his hand, slicing through the studio's noise. The cameras hesitated and then stopped. The audience went quiet. On stage, a woman sat frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her hands shaking as she held a sealed envelope she had just pulled from her purse. "I need everyone to understand something," Dr. Phil said, his voice dropping to the tone he used when the show shifted from television to something much more serious. What we're about to hear changes everything. The next 17 minutes would become the most watched segment in Dr. Phil history. Just 48 hours earlier, the producers had scheduled what appeared to be a routine case. Sarah Mitchell, 32, was coming on the show with her mother, Patricia, 67, to resolve a family dispute over inheritance. Patricia claimed Sarah had manipulated her into changing her will. Sarah insisted she was only trying to protect her mother from her abusive brother, David. It was familiar ground. Dr. Phil had handled hundreds of similar family conflicts before. The production team had completed standard background checks, reviewed documents, and interviewed both parties individually. Everything seemed ordinary. Sarah arrived at the studio that Tuesday morning in a simple blue dress, her blonde hair pulled back, wearing minimal makeup. She looked like any other guest, nervous but hopeful, ready to share her story. Patricia sat beside her in the green room, quiet and withdrawn, avoiding eye contact. The show began as usual. Dr. Phil walked onto the stage to his signature music, greeted the audience, and introduced the case. "Today, we have a mother and daughter in conflict over money and trust," he said, settling into his chair across from them. "Patricia, you believe your daughter manipulated you. Sarah, you say you were protecting your mother. Let's start from the beginning." What nobody knew in the studio was that Sarah carried a secret capable of upending everything they thought they understood. Sarah spoke first, her voice calm. "Dr. Phil, I've spent the last 10 years caring for my mother. When my father died, I moved back home. I gave up my career, my relationships, everything to be there for her. And now she's accusing me of stealing from her." Patricia interrupted sharply. "You isolated me from my friends. You convinced me my son was dangerous. You made me sign papers I didn't understand." Dr. Phil leaned forward. "Sarah, did you isolate your mother from her support system?" "I protected her from people who were hurting her," Sarah replied. "My brother has a history of violence," Patricia shot back. "That's not true." Her voice trembled. "David never hurt anyone. You turned me against my son. You poisoned our relationship. And then you—" She stopped, her hands shaking. Dr. Phil's eyes narrowed. Something didn't add up. He could sense when a story wasn't aligning. "Patricia, what were you about to say?" The older woman looked at her daughter, then back at Dr. Phil. "I don't even know if I can believe anything anymore." Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most intense part of this story is still ahead. Dr. Phil turned to Sarah. "Help me understand something. Your mother is accusing you of very serious actions, but I'm noticing fear in her body language, not anger." "Fear? What is she afraid of?" Sarah's calmness faltered slightly. Her fingers tightened around the armrest. "She's confused. The medication she takes affects her memory." "I'm not confused," Patricia shouted. "I know what I saw. I know what you—" She stopped again, tears filling her eyes. Dr. Phil stood. The audience shifted uneasily. The show wasn't following the expected script. "Patricia, I need you to tell me what really happened," he said. "Not what you think I want to hear. Not what anyone told you to say. What actually happened." The silence stretched. 10, 15, 20 seconds. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every expression, every breath. Then Sarah reached into her purse. She held a white envelope, sealed and thick, her hands trembling so much she nearly dropped it. "Dr. Phil," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Before we continue, there's something you need to know." Dr. Phil looked first at the envelope, then at her face. Decades of experience told him that whatever was inside could completely alter the direction of this conversation. "What is it?" he asked. Her words spilled out in a rush. "I'm not Sarah Mitchell." Dr. Phil froze mid-sentence. The studio fell into a heavy silence. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" His tone was calm, but his body language had changed. He was no longer the talk show host guiding a story. He was a clinical psychologist confronting the unexpected. "My name isn't Sarah," she repeated, this time more firmly. "I'm Jennifer Carson. I met the real Sarah Mitchell 6 years ago at a grief counseling group. She had just lost her mother and I had just lost mine. We became friends. When she told me about her inheritance, the money her mother left her, and the family she distanced herself from because they were toxic." Patricia let out a sharp gasp, a sound somewhere between shock and grief. "Oh my God, stop the tape." Dr. Phil turned to the control room. "Stop everything." The cameras cut off and the audience murmured, confused. He signaled to his producers, "Clear the audience, get security, and someone call." He looked back at Jennifer. "Where is Sarah Mitchell?" Jennifer's face crumpled. "I don't know, I haven't seen her in 4 years." Off camera, Dr. Phil made a decision no producer had expected. What happened next wasn't captured by the main studio cameras. But later, the backup security feed showed something unprecedented in his 40-year career. He sat down on the floor next to Jennifer, eye level, and spoke to her as a person, not a host. "Jennifer, I need you to help me understand what happened. Not for the show, for Patricia, for yourself, for whatever comes next. Can you do that?" Tears streamed freely down Jennifer's face. "I never meant for it to go this far. Sarah and I looked alike. Same height, same build. She showed me photos of her family, people she hadn't seen in years. Her mother passed away when Sarah was young. Patricia was her father's second wife. Sarah had never even met her. So when Sarah's father passed away and left everything to Patricia, Sarah received nothing," Dr. Phil said calmly, piecing the story together. "And that's when you saw an opportunity. Sarah was struggling, broke, and alone. I offered to help her. I told her I would pretend to be her, approach Patricia, build a relationship, convince her to include Sarah in the will, and then split the inheritance. Sarah was desperate enough to agree." Jennifer's voice lowered to a whisper. "But then Sarah vanished. She stopped responding to my calls. Her apartment was empty. I panicked. I had already been pretending to be her for months. Patricia believed I was her stepdaughter. I thought if I kept going, maybe I could fix everything. Maybe I could find Sarah. Maybe I could even keep the money." Dr. Phil spoke quietly. Jennifer didn't deny her confession. She simply handed him an envelope. "This is everything," she said. "The real paperwork, my true identity, Sarah's last known address, everything I should have shared months ago." Dr. Phil stood, holding the envelope. He looked at Patricia, who was being comforted by a producer, and then back at Jennifer. "You understand what this means? You've been committing fraud, elder abuse, and impersonation. When I hand this to the authorities, and I will, you're facing serious criminal charges." "I know," Jennifer replied. "I'm ready." But what happened next surprised everyone, both in the studio and at home. Dr. Phil called the audience back to order. Confused but captivated, they returned as the cameras rolled. Patricia sat wrapped in a blanket, a victim's advocate beside her. Jennifer sat alone, makeup streaked, the envelope open on the table between them. "Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Phil addressed the camera directly. "What you are about to see is not entertainment. This is real. This woman," he gestured to Jennifer, "came on this show under false pretenses. She has admitted to defrauding this family. But before we involve law enforcement, I need to understand one thing." He turned to Jennifer. "Why did you tell the truth? You could have continued the lie. You could have walked away today and nobody would have known. Why stop now?" Jennifer looked at Patricia. "Because she called me daughter last week. On the phone she said, 'I love you, daughter.' And I realized she actually loved me, not Sarah. Me, the imposter, the fake. She loved someone who didn't exist. And I couldn't let her love a lie anymore." The studio fell silent. Dr. Phil let the moment linger. Then he turned to Patricia gently. "Do you have anything you want to say?" The older woman looked at Jennifer, her expression impossible to fully describe. Anger, betrayal, and yet something else, almost grief. "I should hate you," she said. but all I feel is empty. You weren't trying to steal money. You were trying to steal love. And that's worse. Much worse. Dr. Phil called for a break. Behind the scenes, he made 3 phone calls. One to the police, one to a trusted defense attorney to ensure Jennifer had proper legal representation, and one to a private investigator who specialized in missing persons. "We're going to find Sarah Mitchell," he told Jennifer, "and you will face the consequences of your actions. But I'm also going to make sure you get help, because this isn't just fraud. This is someone so desperate for family, so desperate to belong, that you became a completely different person. That tells me something broke inside you a long time ago." When the cameras rolled again, Dr. Phil addressed the audience. "Folks, we're in uncharted territory here. The show you came to watch today isn't the show you're getting. What you're seeing is what happens when desperation meets opportunity and human need. Jennifer Carson will face legal consequences, but she will also receive psychological support. Because both things can be true. She can be guilty and she can be suffering." He turned to Patricia. "You're going to learn the truth about what happened to Sarah Mitchell. I'm personally funding an investigation, whatever it takes." The envelope on the table remained visible for the rest of the taping, a reminder that once truth is revealed, it cannot be hidden again. In the days that followed, the episode went viral. Ethicists debated Dr. Phil's handling of the situation. Legal analysts examined the ramifications. Mental health experts commented on Jennifer's psychology. But most of all, people couldn't stop discussing the moment Jennifer confessed she loved someone who didn't exist. 6 months later, the private investigator located Sarah Mitchell. She was alive, living in Oregon under a new name, struggling with addiction and homelessness. When she learned what Jennifer had done, she didn't respond with anger, but numbness. "I sold my identity for $5,000, she told the investigator. "I signed the papers. I thought it would only be for a month or 2. Then I couldn't face what I'd done, so I ran." Dr. Phil brought both women back for a follow-up episode. Jennifer had been sentenced to probation and restitution, conditional on completing therapy. Sarah had entered rehab. Patricia sat between them, older and more tired, yet somehow steadier. "I'm not seeking revenge," Patricia said. "I want to understand and maybe find a way forward." The show concluded not with final resolution, but with a process. Dr. Phil arranged ongoing therapy for all 3 women, created a trust to protect Patricia financially, connected Sarah to long-term addiction recovery resources, and gave Jennifer something she had unknowingly been seeking her entire life: accountability wrapped in compassion. The episode's impact extended beyond television. It became required viewing in psychology programs studying identity disorders, and law schools used it to teach media ethics. Tens of thousands of viewers reached out, sharing their own experiences of desperation, identity struggles, and lies that had grown too large to control. Dr. Phil kept the envelope in his office, a reminder that sometimes the most meaningful moments on television occur when it stops being television and starts being human. Inside that envelope wasn't just documents or evidence. It represented the moment someone chose truth over comfort, consequence over continued deception. For Patricia, who had loved a daughter who wasn't really her daughter, the envelope held something more: the start of understanding that love, even when directed at an illusion, is still real. The grief of losing that illusion is valid, and the work of rebuilding afterward is still worthwhile. A show intended to focus on inheritance became one about identity. The woman who arrived to be judged became someone confronting herself. The host, originally the mediator, witnessed a lie collapsing and revealing something real about human need: fragility and courage. In the end, the envelope remained sealed in memory, not as proof of crime, but as a symbol that even our worst choices can eventually lead to our most honest moments. Years later, Dr. Phil would reflect, "Sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't maintaining a lie. It's having the strength to destroy it yourself."